I'm going to start, say my name, then if you both can introduce yourselves, and then I will read the little introduction that we have to do. And we'll get started. So, the interviewer name is Dan McCullum.
And Barry Stapleton.
And if you guys would like to introduce yourselves.
Kathie Vint.
And I'm Jim Vint.
All right. And today is the 27th, I believe.
26th.
Oh,
26th, the Wednesday.
okay, you're right. Today is June 26th, 2019, and we are here at the Ward Irish Music Archives. The purpose of this interview is the Midwest Irish Music Oral History Project aims to collect the music and stories of musical artists in Milwaukee and the larger Midwest so that they can be shared with the future generations and their influence can be truly appreciated and understood. So yeah, to start out, can you both tell us a little bit about your own personal histories? Where did you grow up? What was your family life like as a child, and so forth?
Well, I was a Milwaukee born of a family that had migrated here from Duluth, Minnesota. It was Irish with 7 uncles for me. And they came here in distress because, of course, the economy was a bust. And they moved into the north side of Milwaukee, settled in a parish called St. Gall's, which was the new St. Gall's, not the one that used to be downtown. It was the Jesuit place. And I grew up in that parish. There was a certain amount of Irish population there that probably doesn't go well documented in history since. And my mother was a church organist, and she played the piano to accompany the St. Patrick Day sing-along. So I grew up with Mother McCree or whatever all those things were that we had. So that's kind of my Irishness until we get into the 1980s.
Yeah. I grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. My father's mother was born in County Fermanagh, and his father's family was Irish by way of Canada, but the fact that they were Irish really wasn't significant when I was growing up. I mean, my mother was German, and it was just not a big deal that we were Irish. The only thing I remember is they had these Bing Crosby record with all the Irish American stuff, and I don't even think my dad listened to him. I think he was listening to Jimmy Dorsey, but I just, for some reason, I'd lie on the living room floor.
Barry's going to love you
Really?
because Barry's a collector.
That's my woman there, yeah.
Really, like, his record collection is long gone. But that was really it. I mean, like Jim, I don't have anything significant to add until we discovered dancing, basically.
Well, I mean, I guess we can start from there. How did you both discover dancing?
First, we went to Irish Fest.
I think it was 1987.
Right, for the first time. And we weren't real excited about a lot of the music we heard, but we really liked Dannon and we really liked Scarticlan. And so we decided the next year, which was our 25th wedding anniversary, that maybe we'd go to Ireland and kind of look into this Irish music stuff. So, Jim,
Yeah, I went and did some research and I found out there was a festival in Ennis, which being West Clare, I thought, well, that's probably good, rather than Dublin, you know. And the Ennis Festival is a Fleadh Nua, which has been going on for a good number of years.
already.
Yeah, and it was very much kind of a local festival that had lots of music and a lot of visitors coming in for it. So we thought, well, we should go to that. And so as a part of our trip,
Yeah, the last 2 nights actually we were in Ennis. I was sick as a dog, and Jim went to the Kushnahana, which is where the cultus in Ennis has their dances, and he came back and he said, "You've got to go tomorrow night. You've just got to." And we went out there, and it was the last night of the Fleadh, and these people were dancing, and we couldn't tell. We didn't know what we were seeing, but they were doing these incredibly complicated figures all at the same time, to the same music. And
no callers.
No caller,
nothing.
it was just so wild. We just thought, God, you know. So naturally we went back the next year.
Yeah, but on the way there, we came back to Milwaukee and we thought, well, what can we do that's Irish here? We know about this stuff now. Maybe we should try to go to Irish Fest again. We went to Irish Fest. Oh, we discovered the summer school.
Summer school
Okay,
schedule. That was
so we
it.
went to summer school class. We found it Cayley class. Was it?
Yeah, taught by a step dancer.
Yeah. So we took a Cayley dance class, and we thought, well, this isn't what we saw, but it's similar. And we went off to the festival, and the Matilda Bay dance floor was the place to dance there at that time. And it was actually a floor as opposed to later years when the floors disappeared. But at Matilda Bay, we joined some people and got to know a couple of people. It was Cayley dancing. And it was kind of fun, but we didn't know much about what we're doing. We had never danced. I don't think we ever danced together
No.
in our entire marriage.
No.
So there we are, asking people about, is there dancing around here?
And they said Nash's.
Nash's Irish
And
Castle?
So we went to Nash's, followed the little green footsteps, and learned. Well, Woodfords were teaching it at the time. I think they had just taken over from Kathy Mallon, and so we went there pretty much every week for the whole next year and learned Cayley dancing, and they were happy to have us, and because they still had a pretty small group.
Yeah.
Then we went back to Ennis the next year.
Yeah, we thought we haven't seen yet what they were doing in Ennis. If we don't go back there, we'll never find it again. So we went back and we scheduled to go to the entire Flanua, and
Classes.
yeah, and there was a guy, Pat Liddy, taught a class. Well, he was a character, all right.
He was uncle of Dennis Liddy with the
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Yeah, but he taught the class, and we spent the hour, and we went away, and we came back for the dance, and boy, it was probably 17 times as much happening as the class got to us and taught us about and gave us a chance to do. So we were there, and we tried to dance, and we get up, and I didn't know what I was doing really, but I tried, and we looked like. Decades later, we could recognize other people trying to do the same kind of struggle and to produce
But
this stuff.
they were very welcoming, and then we tried to find written material about it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a totally new concept. This is 1980, 89. No, the first time, yeah, 89. And there wasn't. We couldn't find. We went into Limerick, and we tried to find books. And we were in Killarney, and there were none of those books that have come out since, the Moylan and the Lynch. Lynch may have been around, but we didn't see it.
I think he was doing his documentation in the late
Yeah.
80s. Yeah.
So we would go back to the B&B, and I would try to remember what we had done and write it down. Didn't have the names, so I didn't even really realize what we were doing. Didn't know that the connection between Cayley dance, we couldn't still pronounce Cayley, but didn't know the connection at all between them or the history or anything. We just loved the dance.
And we started learning a few things. One of the things we learned is that set dancing was kind of a bad thing to do. It was extremely unpopular among any people that were nationalists because they thought this was British influenced stuff. Okay. But in fact, the Cayley dances, the set dances arrived in Ireland from England indeed, but they had come from France. They were based on the quadrilles, which is well documented. And so we're there trying to dance these dances to this Irish music, which we haven't gotten accustomed to yet, and had an interesting time of it.
Well, and there would be people in the Flanua was at the end of May, and there were people from the north who came down, and they didn't do sets in the north as a rule, but these people wanted to do the sets, and so there would be they would want Cayleys too. So the first years in Ennis, there were Cayleys and there were sets, and then gradually the Cayleys disappeared, and the set at first, it was pretty much the Caledonian, and that.
There were a couple of sets, and they would do a waltz and they would do a Cayley dance. So it was repetitive, and I think this is fairly common in the culture until all of a sudden the explosion of set dancing.
Yeah.
Part of the explosion, we mentioned Lynch. Larry Lynch was a guy from San Francisco, and he had been, when he was a kid, he had been a step dancer, and his family had kept set dances alive in the home in San Francisco. So he decided he should go find out what these set dances were, and his book documents all this stuff. But he went over and he produced the book. And this was the most serious study of set dancing done anywhere in the world. And he produced copious numbers of dances and created a much larger body of material. And then other people came along, tried to add to that, and they wanted to create their own. So we had this explosion of dances. And of course, when the peace process got going in the North, guess what happened to set dancing? Every county in the North had to have its own set dance. So rather than being opposed to set dancing, it became an integral part of that. And what does that mean to Milwaukee? Okay, I think we should take it back to Milwaukee. We started off in '89 at Nash's doing Cayley. We tried to teach a set sometime in maybe early '90.
We kept going back to Ennis.
And we didn't know enough, and we couldn't get enough people. And
So, can I just interrupt?
Sure.
So, when you were saying you went to Nash's, they were doing cake.
They were
they
doing
were doing
Cayley.
Cayley.
So nobody was doing
exclusively.
sets there.
Nobody
No
doing-
sets. There was no sets. There was no sets in Milwaukee.
Okay.
I think there were some in Chicago at that time.
But we
because
didn't
the
know
old,
that.
The old-time people in
And
Chicago
you're
brought
talking
it
the middle
over.
80s.
1989.
No, 89
Yeah.
and thereafter. Yeah, we didn't know anywhere else there was set
Okay.
dancing
Except
except
in
in Ennis, frankly.
So, well, and then when we arrived after our visit in '91, we thought, well, we've got the Caledonian set down pretty well. We should try to teach that. So we recruited some people from the Cayley dancers, and we set aside a separate time from the Cayley
Earlier,
dancers,
yeah.
and we started a class. And that was the beginning of Milwaukee set dancing, and we had it, I think from then, there was hardly a week ever missed over the years for set dancing. So we brought in more people got word of mouth, we tried to go to Irish Fest and have flyers and promote set dancing at Nash's. And we found Irish Fest wasn't doing set dancing and they weren't a venue that were very useful for our purposes. So we tried to commandeer things, like we tried to take over the dance at the volunteer night, right? And we found that the floor was a disaster and we made a big fuss. And I think I circulated a petition and alarmed the Ward family when I did that.
They weren't familiar with it.
Oh, they didn't know what set
People who
dancing
had-
was either.
Yeah, they weren't familiar
No.
with it at all.
But-
And
Yeah.
So this would have been about 1990, 91.
91,
92.
92. And I remember a conversation with one of the wards about we were dancing on asphalting.
Oh, we made some.
You know, they just didn't get it. You know, and I can understand that because they had never seen it. And but we wrote
Yeah.
letters and petitions and stuff.
Right.
And eventually, yeah, they got the dance floor.
And when was
Yeah.
it, Barry? Is it about 94 or 5 that Chuck went to Ireland? He produced a document that
Yeah.
said, hey, I went to Ireland, I saw set dancing, and it's a big thing.
Well, he also
He was very, I remember that, he was
Yeah.
very impressed.
All of a sudden,
Yeah.
it became something.
Willie Clancy Week. That was
I
what
heard
it
it,
was
you're
at.
probably
And,
right.
and that kind of brought the visibility of set dancing in Milwaukee, teaching in the Cayley area, what do you call it, the sports area.
Yeah.
Thursday night, getting a couple of bands and having a mix of kinds of dances. All that stuff evolved in through the 90s. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think I'm not trying to defend what we did.
Oh, no.
But I think most people going to Ireland would not see set dancing. It was,
Right.
it was in the small towns on the west side of Ireland, I think, it was maybe a regular night in a small bar or something like that. But it was not a Dublin.
Oh, no, it wasn't a
You
tourist.
still have to know where to go in Dublin
Right.
to find it.
Totally wasn't a tourist thing
Right,
anyway.
yeah.
But it was.
And there weren't any websites you could go to and say, hey, where there's set dancing
Yes.
tonight.
Yeah, right. No,
You know,
no,
it wasn't until Bill Lynch started producing his stuff that he documented this tremendous scope of teachers and venues that are operating throughout Ireland almost every week.
But the whole thing too at that time was it was really the beginning of a surge.
Okay.
Um,
Oh,
even at Willie Clancy Week or at Augusta, we went to Augusta 3 times, and we were I don't know how many times.
Well, and it's all writing on the back of the trad music thing,
Yeah.
but because it fits trad music as well as it
Right.
does,
Yeah.
it also just rode right up the
Yeah.
ladder
The
there.
90s were the hot
Yeah.
decade.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That was it. And you're right. I mean, it was small places. One year, about 92 maybe 90, we rented a house in Cary for a week.
Fieries,
Fieries.
north of Killarney.
North of Killarney, and we went 4 of the nights we were there, we went to a different local place to dance. And every place we went, they were just local instructions, and we'd say, "What dance do you do?" And they'd say, "The polka set." and every polka set was not quite like the other polka sets. It was just, now it's probably more standardized, but then it was just still all this little local stuff. And we had this tremendous feeling of discovery, really, I think.
So what was, when you described starting the classes and everything, so what was the first years of set dancing like in Milwaukee when you first started the classes before things started to pick up?
Well,
It's slow.
we had all those things you do when you hit something new and you want to get people interested. Use Irish Fest as a vehicle to publicize, turn around and have classes every week at Nash's, have house parties, get musicians. Local musicians love to play for set dancing. And they would turn up and they would come to a house party, we'd buy them a beer, and they'd play all night. And our dancers just loved all this. And this was a theme that went on many years. Of course, we got to the point, over time we were able to start having competing dances with Irish Fest. We had our late Friday night ceilidh. It started at 11:30 p.m. Because Irish Fest didn't have a wood floor. We could go and get a Legion Hall for $50, and we could get musicians almost free, and except we'd pass the hat. And we danced. We were down at the one they just tore down at KK, and we did that at Turner Hall.
ICHC though too for Milwaukee.
Well, ICHC wasn't even there in the
That was much
earliest
later.
years.
Oh,
Right.
Much later.
Yeah, later on that became a real
Actually,
fixture.
Yeah, the first time we did it though was because there still was no set dancing at Irish Fest, and people, we had been to Augusta, to Irish Week at Augusta, and we met a lot of people there, and several of them came to Milwaukee, and they were very excited about coming to Milwaukee, but there was no set dancing on the grounds. So that was the first time that we had the late night ceilidh, that was why. But then it just got a life of its own. But you ask about at Nash's, I mean, we were lucky. You have to have 8 people. It doesn't really work very well. And we were not real great dancers, but we were determined we were going to do this. So you get, 8 willing bodies, and you walk through it, and you go through it, and you go through it, and you go through it, and it takes a long time to learn a set and to get a sense of the moves. So that first
First
year,
year
I
or
think
two
it
was really a struggle.
yeah, I mean, we finally all got so we could do the Caledonian, which is highly repetitive. And then way toward the end, I think we tried to teach the Claire Plain set, which has many more complex moves.
Well, and they moved on from there, yeah. But there were enough people interested. There was a core of people with enough skill set now developed in set dancing that we were able to start doing bigger things, like having a midnight ceilidh, and having more people to help instructing down at Irish Fest and so on.
And the great thing about Nash's was that it had a reputation. And Josie, she was fine as long as anybody who wanted to dance, we let them come. I mean, we didn't.
We would teach them.
Yeah, I mean,
And that,
so
that was our mission, is to teach people there, so why not, yeah.
But Nash's, I think, was a huge, huge factor.
Yeah.
Probably not just in dance, but in just everything Irish in Milwaukee.
So in the early years when you went to Augusta and say Willie Week,
Yeah.
were they by that point doing set dancing in isolation from ceilidh? Or
Yeah, I mean, it was just, we went to set
Well-
dance classes.
Clancy Week was entirely set dance. I don't remember
I don't know if
any
there were any
ceilidh at
there,
all. Augusta was more mixed in the earlier years because, many people had already come into the ceilidh tradition. For example, there's the Washington D.C. Ceilidh Club, was a lot of people who went to Augusta, and they were tied into Mick Maloney's
Well, and that guy who
involvement
died,
in that whole thing.
yeah.
Famous
Yeah,
set
big,
dancer, taught classes,
big
Connie,
reputation. Connie somebody.
all over the East Coast. He went every
Anyway,
year. He went to different venues,
But-
and this is before our time. Actually, he was going over there doing that.
Yeah.
So the East Coast was a much more vibrant thing than the Midwest, anyway.
But one of the things that we had to educate Irish Fest about was that you can't do both kinds of dances on the same floor at the same time because they have totally different musical requirements. And that there was a really bad year at Irish Fest when they didn't get that. And the band just played. and we were all supposed to get up and do our thing. And
We got almost thrown out of a coldest convention by trying to do both on the floor.
Donica was his name. The guy, Mominahan.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wanted to do Kaylee.
Anyway,
Yeah.
other things I think are very interesting is because we were able to attract musicians who wanted to play for dancing, and we could pass the hat at the late night Kaylee. We would have people. John Whalen would come in and he'd bring a whole band.
Yeah.
Not necessarily his band, but he put together one.
Yeah.
All kinds of people. And I thought it was kind of fun the day that Natalie McMaster walked in and said, "Gee, I don't know this music she says."
But it was, yeah, we were lucky. Our timing was lucky.
Yeah, we had a lot of people come over too. They came for summer school. Sometimes they came for we had started these midwinter weekends where we were
It was
hosting.
2001, I
I
think.
think so. We were hosting a regional set dance weekend, and we'd bring over known people, big instructors, and bands. Sometimes
We didn't bring over bands.
We brought in John Whelan the most.
Right,
probably.
John Whalen, yeah.
Now we get Kaylee Kaltori Chicago because they're cheaper.
But yeah, but it was just a very gradual process.
So that touches on two questions,
Sure.
really. First of all, you mentioned the difference between Kaylee and set dancing. For the uninitiated who might be viewing this interview in the future, could you give a brief description of the differences between the two different styles of dance and music?
Yes, a circle dance probably, or think of a line dance or a circle dance, and you probably see some of that in these days, country line dancing and things like that, and you see it in some other folk dancing, particularly Eastern European folk dancing has a lot of circle and line dances. And that's a whole evolved tradition. It's led to all kinds of things in lots of places. But the set dancing,
The Kaylee, some of the Kaylee comes from, like there's a Kaylee dance that's from, related to the Virginia Reel.
yeah,
So it comes
similarity
from those
there.
kinds of folk dances, and they're they're repetitive. I mean, they have a pattern, a relatively simple pattern. Most of them. There are a few that are complex, like I Called Cat, but mostly it's a simple pattern that you repeat, and then you progress and you do the same moves with the next group of people, and you get to the end of the line and you turn around and go back.
yeah.
Um,
But I'd like to say one thing about set dancing. If you take a look at set dancing, you understand that there's 8 people, customarily, almost always, 8 people. They're dancing to Irish traditional music, reels, jigs, polkas, slides,
hornpipes.
hornpipes. That's about it.
Waltz position. That's a big
Waltz
difference.
position occurs a lot, but you often start off circle of 8 people, and you do some pattern that's kind of nice looking. And then the key thing is that there's footwork that's very unique to it. It's specific to what you're doing. The difference between American square dance is that a square dance is you just walk. You may go through patterns that have similarities, but it's just all nothing with your feet. It's not the kind of footwork that step dancers do with the fancy tappy hard shoes and all this stuff. It's more on the ground. It's supposed to be on the ground. You know, some people get off the ground, and it takes a certain amount of months to feel that you've learned how to do even just one of the particular kinds of footwork. And polkas are different than slides, are different from jigs, and different from reels, and hornpipes. They're all different. Styles of music require different kinds of dancing. So that's kind of a little difference between.
It always looked to me like a little bit of a shuffle, the footwork in the sense.
The Clare style is very flat and low to the ground, except for the tippity
And
tap
you're supposed
stuff.
to be sliding your feet.
Yeah,
really.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
more of it. The tippy taps came into it.
The men
in
used to do that
various
initially.
ages.
Yeah, but step dancing has influenced that considerably too, and it's gotten a lot higher and a lot more poundy sometimes.
So can you go to Ireland and if you were to see set dancing, let's say it's a big hall and all sorts of different sets,
Yeah.
can you pick out the different styles? Is it like music in Ireland where there's, you know, the Donegal style, Sligo style and things like that? Is set dancing the same way where you can tell different styles?
To some extent, but it's
it's
become
not-
so homogenized because so many people travel to do it now. And instructors are from point A and he's teaching in point B. So you get this mingling. I'm sure you're getting that with the music too a lot. You know, not everybody's Martin Hayes doing his Claire or whatever it is.
The stylistic differences are not, I mean, they're in the dance, can be in the dancing, but it's the music that's regional that creates
Gotcha, okay.
the dancing styles. When we were in Ennis one of the years, and Pat Liddy was teaching whatever he was teaching, and then he had a guy from Labashida, Peter from Labashida
Peter
came
from Labashida,
to
yeah.
teach us the Labashida set, and the Labashida set has a polka in it, I believe, and the Clare sets that we had, even though Labashida is in Clare, there were no polkas in any of the sets he'd been teaching. They were all reels and a couple of jigs, and he apologized, to everybody, because the polka was so fast, because it was a Carey polka, and he couldn't find a Clare polka that was the right speed for it. So, yeah, and the other thing about Cayley set dancing is that it has 5 or 6 figures to it. And each figure can be to a different type of music. Some sets are all 6 reels or all 6 polkas or whatever. But some of them will be a couple of reels, then a jig set, and the music stops in between them. And if you're doing this at the same time somebody's doing Cayley, they're going to get real frustrated because they can't continue dancing. Which is another reason they don't both work on the same floor at the same time. And most sets will end with a hornpipe or something.
A hornpipe is
A lot
typically,
of-
it's a social figure too,
Yeah,
you mix up
yeah.
their partners.
Yeah.
One of the things that I didn't comment on, neither of us commented on, is the fact when we first started doing dancing down at Irish Fest, there wasn't a whole lot of organized dancing. So the Cayley dancers would migrate to the side of, what was the middle stage, not the Miller, not the,
Oops, the Paps was the middle of it.
Yeah.
okay. They'd migrate to the Pap stage and they would dance to whoever was playing music there on the aisles or in the sides. And the set dancers gradually started doing that. But needing 8, so the Cayley dancers can dance with 1 or 2. We're needing 8, we had to be much more organized.
Yeah. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, it definitely does. And the second question I was going to ask, you mentioned bringing in local musicians to play for the set dance. I'm sure for the dance as well as the practices. What are some of the names of the people that you got? What kind of relationships did you have?
The first person that we ever encountered was at Nash's and was sitting up on the stage and pregnant. I think she was pregnant at the moment.
Who was
Maria.
Maria.
Teresandrin was playing there, and she would play for Cayley dancing. And I think there's somebody with a power
She was
on.
playing with some other people who also played. They would play for Cayley Nash's.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I can see them, but I can't remember their names.
Yeah, I can't either. But that gradually led to, when we started set dancing, we wanted to have some good music, and we were happy to have live music. And Ed Paluchek was on the
right.
scene. He was a 20-year-old
I
kid
don't know. He was real happy to be
with
the
nothing
grown-ups.
else to do in his life. Don't quote me. With
Then he
nothing
didn't.
else to do in his life but go to Nash's and play an hour's worth of reels for dancers solo. Now, that's a challenge, especially when the dancers don't want to stop for anything, they want to control everything. No, he was a marvel.
He was great.
for us.
And I can't even remember some of the. There was. Gillies used to play. Glenn Gillies used
Gillies,
to play
yeah.
at Nash's, but I don't recall they're particularly playing for
a
dance.
little bit. We had to coax them, I think, to get them into the back room.
And then Brett came to town, and
Brett Lipschitz, Brett
and
is
then and David Delgado then started playing Baron, and
well,
they
then
formed
this whole bunch of
various-
people. But concurrent with this was this kind of a slow session activity we started at Nash's. I started that because I wanted to play, and I didn't play. And every set dance teacher that I ever met was an accordion player. So I thought I should be an accordion player. So I got myself a box one of the trips to Ireland. I came back and started monkeying with it. And I started a slow session so I could have something to play with. And people turned up like Mark and
Gray, Asher Gray.
Asher Gray turns up, 12-year-old kid. Got him into it. It was enough for that. Even his dad took up the violin, who refuses to play now. And there were other people that came out of the scene just because it was a slow session. I think it was a resource that just continued that acceleration of interest. Enough interest there, if you can hear it, there's music, Irish music class, people are going to go to it no matter what you do.
Well, there was Phil.
Phil Rebenzer, of course, Phil was doing his
Yeah.
documentation, he was recording, and he was also doing bowron playing through that whole cycle.
And,
We had people like the, pardon us while we think about names. You'll probably have
this
to
was
correct
actually a
these.
very long time ago.
Yeah,
Well,
Kathleen.
and Ed, Kathleen and Jack, but they didn't.
But they played
Nashes.
Rira, and Rira would play for dancing at that stage.
But
And
not
it was
at
back.
Nashes, yeah.
It was back a long time ago.
Yeah.
And they would,
Nancy Gottschalk.
one and the other would turn up for stuff.
Yeah.
Nancy Gottschalk, great fiddler. So when we started having monthly dances, we had resources to draw together, and I think we were able to run through a cycle of 5 or 6 local bands. When you think of that, and you would have them on your lists of
Local
people you got to
individuals.
play down there.
Local individuals who played
Who
together.
came together to
Yeah.
play
That's more accurate.
in different combinations.
That's gonna be my chicken or the egg question. So did the
Yeah.
individual playing for dances come first and then the bands? Or did they form bands and then start playing for
Well,
dancers?
Well, Rira
I think
existed,
the
of course.
individuals
The
came
going-
first. I certainly
Yeah,
the group that David and Ed and Phil and John Szynski and those guys. I mean that they were all playing separately, and then
well, if there was a
Coalesced.
session, which Ed always had sessions, if there was a session, sometimes dancers would try to get space in the venue to dance too, and try to control a little bit about what went on. And of course, this was a nightmare like Bodolino's after summer school and stuff, where you had all these musicians together and the dancers want to cram in there and get floor space and tell them what to play. And that never, some people were accepting that, and some people didn't want that at all.
liked it. A few didn't.
Yeah.
So what, you mentioned Nash's obviously being a big one, but what were some of the other venues that you either had classes at or that you would stage dances at?
Well, we had Black Shamrock, and Black
That was
Shamrock
much
collapsed
later.
because of a management problem.
That was much later. That was in the late 90s.
We were in Blue Mound Inn in the basement.
Mound Inn.
I think that's where we were. It's the one that's on. And we were at Derry's. We got
We did
arranged
classes
with
at
Derry's.
Derry's.
And we had problems at Derry's because his patrons didn't like the music. They didn't like the Irish
Yeah, they
music.
didn't like the Irish
And we're
music.
trying to dance and bring in bands.
We
He
were
didn't want
doing
them.
Sunday afternoon.
This was on Sunday nights, I think.
Sunday
it was.
afternoon.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
had at one point we had classes at the Irish Fest office when they were still out on Glenview.
Yeah, yeah.
We had classes. Well, obviously, eventually at the ICHC. Although that's not a good place for classes. That we didn't do that. We mostly had dances at the ICHC. Jerry O'Sullivan started monthly Cayley dances early on, and even before we were doing sets, we would go to those. He had those at Garibaldi's, and I think maybe we did some classes at Garibaldi's. I don't know.
Yeah, we did a little bit of that. And after Nash's closed, we moved to Bordolino's because we were familiar with that. And the problem there was he lost his lease somewhere, and I didn't like the lease. Something.
We also taught at Long Wong's.
Long Wong's. Paul Wong was very supportive of
Yeah,
us.
the bowling alley.
We were at O'Donoghue's at that time, but O'Donoghue's had that fire, it destroyed the place. And Paul took us on, allowed us to dance there. And it was back to O'Donoghue's once he got that open. O'Donoghue's has been the scene ever since.
Weren't you at a Veterans Place, or was that the Cayley's?
Oh, the North,
Well, that was
the
the
North
Cayley's.
Shore.
Oh,
no,
North
the
Shore. We
Shore,
did classes at North Shore.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there were
I don't think we
dances.
ever rented that for a dance.
We did. We had dances there, and we tried because Woodfords were already using that
Right.
for Cayley and I think
Ah.
for Contra.
Okay, yeah.
And we had some. I don't know if we had classes there, but we did dance there. And I remember we tried to have some dances that combined the two styles, and that was not real successful.
The Contra and the Cayley.
Cayley and sets.
Cayley and
Sets.
sets.
Then we'd do it, this Cayley dance, we'd do a set dance, we'd do
Yeah.
Cayley dance, set
Yeah,
dance through the evening.
Some people
Uh,
would do both. Some people.
Didn't
I
want to
mean,
do both.
Cayley is much more user friendly.
Can you get into that
Sure.
about the dancers?
Sure.
Who would be coming to Cayley's, and would people do both, or was it kind of separate, or? talk about that?
Well, it was kind of interesting. I think there was an evolution there.
Yeah, there was.
Some of the dancers that were doing Cayley dancing, a small number of them, were interested in trying set dancing, and some of them stuck with it, and some of them didn't care for the
Yeah.
complexity or whatever else, of the footwork or something. And the style of dancing, the Cayley dancers, of course, there was some stringent requirements if you're going to do Cayley dancing right. Let's put it that way. First thing you do is you start on the other foot. Then you start set dancing. So it's always something to learn. At Nash's, we started off by
The people we had initially
Yeah.
for set dancing were people who were already doing Cayley.
yeah.
I think there was maybe one person, I think Pat McGovern, I'm not sure, eventually showed up because she'd seen it publicized somewhere and she had not been doing Cayley.
Yeah.
And she brought David Delgado. But mostly it was, we started with people who were doing Cayley, and then some of them came to prefer sets, some of them came to not like
Yeah.
to do sets.
And then, yeah.
And then we got, because we were promoting this so much, we started getting people who wanted specifically to do sets. Even though anybody who did sets could do Cayley as well, if they chose. But Cayley sets are more challenging, and some people preferred that.
It might have been a year or two in that we had, perhaps, we could put together 16 people to do a performance. We weren't a performing group, but we could go and do set dances for somebody. For example, the North Avenue Irish Fest parade, I think it was the North
We went to
Avenue
a couple of old folks.
Irish parade, not the
Which
Irish
is
Fest.
incredible. I think.
The Irish parade for St. Patrick's Day, we were invited to go into some school there and do performances so people could see other Irish things happening.
Occasionally.
And that kind of contact, and that Irish Fest exposure just get more and more people drawn in, and the fact that we were teaching down at Irish Fest just sucked in more people. So you had Cayley and set dancing going on in the same place, and eventually we were able to figure out how to do that differently, so we had a floor.
But yeah, it was very much an individual preference one way or the other.
So, what are some of your favorite stories from the days of running the dances and the classes? Anything particularly funny?
I thought about that because that was on the list, and actually this isn't a story. We'd get people coming cold. Sometimes it was just people who came to Nash's because they were newly divorced or something, actually. And, it wasn't all people who were coming madly to dance. But people would be interested, and they'd say, gee, and then they start apologizing and say, well, I'm not really Irish. And it finally got to the point where I would say one of the best Irish musicians here is a Jewish kid from New York who came here to study the Baroque flute. And one of the best Irish dancers is a Caribbean American kid, meaning Alan. And I think that, I don't even know if that helped anybody, but I think it is such a great statement of the music, which doesn't matter. It's Irish music, but it doesn't matter where you come from. If it speaks to you, it speaks.
It's a culture.
Yeah, it's a way of.
Some of the first dancers we met after we knew what was going on in Ireland at Flanua were Japanese. They came from
they came
Tokyo,
from Japan.
called us in Tokyo in 1990 to go to Flanua.
Yeah.
It's like a magnet.
Yeah, and there were groups from Germany and all kinds of stuff like that.
I think the interesting story too, when Alan Beale arrived in Ireland, he was knowing some set dancing, and he went to all the dances, and he met all kinds of people and stayed in all the B&Bs and stuff, and really was an emissary for Milwaukee in a way, if you think about it. And it's so unfortunate we lost him last year.
Yeah. And he was really apprehensive about going to Ireland too. He kept saying to me, are they going to be okay with me? My people? No problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a loss.
Yeah.
Okay. So you just mentioned a few individual dancers and everything were prominent. Can you think of any others, people who'd been coming that you guys formed a good relationship with, who then went on, to interact with the greater Irish music scene at all?
Well, I think there are a couple of people. that are tangential both to Set and Kaylee. One was Julie Clark, who early on started to be involved in Kaylee dancing, and she did a little bit with Sets, not a lot, but she became a fixture in Kaylee dancing in the Milwaukee area for decades.
Yeah, she was doing those.
And of course, the other party that when Kathie and I decided to back further away from active involvement in day-to-day set dancing, Gail Clark and Mike came by, and
they've been doing it ever since.
and
God bless.
she was willing to teach some things. She was teaching the Paris set down at Nash's in the earlier years because she loved the set so much. I don't think she likes it that much anymore. So that gave us an easy way to transition into new people involved in it with new life. Because of course we're not getting younger. We that was our 25th wedding anniversary when we discovered this, and you imagine what we're coming up on now.
Yeah, there were people who, I mean, like David Delgado, who he isn't active now, but he was about 12, I think, and he came with his mother and sat at Nash's while she was dancing, and then he's graduated.
Yeah, well, and the story about him is a really strange story. There would be like a pouting 12-year-old kid having to sit through this stuff while mom was there, and after about 10 weeks or 6 or something, I said, David, we don't have enough people. We need somebody else. Can you get up? He got up and he knew what he was doing. He had spent all that time studying the whole story. So,
and I mean, then there were people like Julie Sanfilippi, who doesn't dance anymore much either, but she was from the beginning, she was really enthusiastic about dancing, and she's a beautiful dancer.
Can you dig into the calling aspect of it?
It's not called.
okay.
It's not, it's not. So Kaylee's are and
Yeah,
sets are
absolutely
not.
the difference.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
The thing about set dances is that when you learn them, you have to learn them, and you have to carry around. We create cheat sheets in the early days, so you
Okay.
can pull out the sheet. And remember, you get pauses between the figures of the music, so people whip out these things and say, "What's the next figure?"
Yeah.
And somebody says, "This," and then they all huddle and off they go. So it's part of the learning curve is to be able to memorize enough of this stuff so that you feel comfortable doing that. And calling it sometimes is done because, for example, somebody comes over here and does a workshop, brings a new set over, teaches it in the workshop, they want to do it at the dance that night. Well, does anybody remember all the details of the thing they did once? No. So then you put somebody at the microphone, like the instructor at the microphone, and say, okay. And a good instructor will say, okay, now we're going to do this, 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 and this, and let people go. A bad instructor will say, okay, now do this, okay, now do that, okay, now do, and just ruin the whole flow of the music.
Right.
It just does not work with the music.
And I think the fact, I mean, there's two different things that evolve from the fact that it's not called. I mean, it's not called because traditionally these dances were, each area had its own dance, and kids grew up knowing them. So it didn't have to be called. They just absorbed it. And because it's not called, it's more challenging to learn, to do. You could, I mean, because you're dancing with a partner and you're in waltz position all the time, you can get a partner, or your partner can get you, depending, around the set without a whole lot of trouble. You may not be dancing beautifully, but you'll be where you should be when you should be there. And some people are more comfortable with that. There were a few men who just didn't even want to bother to learn how to do it because they knew that their lady partner was going to take them where they had to go.
Okay.
And one of the things.
I'm sorry. The other thing about calling is it covers up the music.
Yeah, exactly.
And if I were a musician, I would be really unhappy to be playing for a dance where every 3 measures somebody was shouting out instructions. I mean, that just that just doesn't work. That's disrespectful.
Yeah. I was going to say something, but I can't remember what. You'll remember what it was. One of the things about set dancing traditionally, which is somewhat documented, is that people probably only dance one set in their house.
Because it was the local.
In their neighborhood.
The local
They danced the set, and then somebody would sing a song, and somebody would do something else. So it's just part of the whole idea of the Kaylee, which meant the whole broad brush of cultural things.
A huli or whatever.
Whatever.
It was part of that.
Yeah. And a lot of musicians in the West still talk about hoping they can have more house parties, more,
Oh,
you know, and this is what did musicians do? There were 4 musicians in the neighborhood, and they went over to somebody's house on Wednesday night, and they played, and that's what they did. And the neighbors came to listen to them and tell a story and sing a song. So this culture still wants to exist. Unfortunately, in today's day and age, it's really hard.
this reminds me of Gleason's in Court,
Oh,
which we heard about like some mythical place, and we managed to find it, which was amazing because it's in the middle of nowhere, and it isn't there anymore anyhow. But we're fortunate enough to be there maybe 3 or 4 times, I think, in our visits, and yeah, this is what it was. I mean, these old ladies got up and did the part of the Caledonian. Or however much of it they felt like doing, and then somebody would sing the song, and somebody would do something else, and sing, and then they get up and do another figure of the Caledonian, and it was just so relaxed and so natural, and yet
yeah. One of the other things when you talk about Gleason's, I'm reminded of is the fact that when we started dancing, we had set dancing and stuff, and I think we had some classes at Nash's, and Mary June Hanrahan turned up.
yeah.
And Mary June was very interested in this, and so she went off. Well, first of
She
all,
went on Larry Lynch.
except Kathie and I went on Larry Lynch's tour, which is a tour. He took a bus of 15 people around to all these little corner kitchen, somebody's kitchen in the corner of some town or in farmhouse, and spent the whole night dancing in the kitchen while the accordion player played and drank, and you know, it was just we got out of that one at sunrise.
Literally.
So Mary June went on that tour, and Mary June then discovered Gleason's. I think even before. I don't know
Yeah,
if
she
it was before
probably
us.
did. Yeah.
But Mary June became a habitué at Gleason's, became a best friend of Nell Gleason, and is even mentioned in the Gleason book. Nell Gleason's. I assume you have it.
Yeah, you
Nell
have that,
Gleason's
don't you?
book.
Yeah.
I think so,
Yeah.
Yeah,
we
that's
have it if you
worthwhile.
don't. But yeah, it's not just the dancing; it's the culture.
So.
I got, can you go back to the nationalism aspect, what you know of that? Dig deeper on that if you can.
We were basically told this stuff. One of the times we were in Ennis for the Flanua, a couple who they had seen us the previous year,
Nolan.
Noel and Seamus, yeah, and they started talking to us, and they were the ones. They were from north. They were from Dungannon, in Fermanagh, and they told us that they were down there because they wanted to do the set dancing, because it just wasn't done in the north and it was frowned on and all that. And they invited us, well, it turned out that they were neighbors of my second cousins, which was very interesting. But they invited us to visit them, and we went up there, and they invited us to go to a dance in Balahi, which is
Way up.
up in the northern part of the north. And we went to that dance, and it was non-stop Ceilidh dancing. Only Ceilidh dancing, just
Yeah.
for about 3 hours. And they brought the
It was
sandwiches out
actually
in the
2
middle.
hours. It started 11 p.m. Irish time is 11 p.m. It started on time. That's the first item. And the second thing was that they did break for sandwiches, little sandwiches at the midpoint.
But that was the social dancing in Northern Ireland at that time. That was it. This was what, 92, maybe 93. It was all Ceilidh.
Yeah.
And they weren't the only people coming down to because of it. And the story about it being viewed as part of the British tradition, I don't know where we got
There's a lot of documentation of that, because I think some of the people and I can't get into the right niche. There were certainly people that were activists in Ireland that didn't want anything to do with anything British. And that cast set dancing as a derivative of British things. But set dancing wasn't visible in Ireland. In 1970, if you went looking for set dancing, you'd have to go back to that corner farmhouse to find it at all. So the suppression, if you want to call it that, the disappearance of set dancing may well have been driven by all the things that evolved since set dancing first arrived in Ireland. which is what, 1900.
Who wrote that book? Was that Pat Murphy?
Pat
Or was
Murphy
it-
documented, he wrote a lot of history.
documented a lot of history, yeah.
So what's happened there is you've got these roots coming from Dublin, coming from London. The Dublin dance masters adapted things to Irish traditional music. It moved into the countryside. It lost its popularity in the big city, and that's what lingered on.
And so that's the British connection, where the association with British.
It
Right.
came from
That's
London.
our understanding.
That's,
But I guess to me that doesn't make sense then, if it comes from British, why would it be denied in the North?
It was the Irish in the
Had
north.
association with
It was the
but-
Irish in the north. It wasn't the Scots in the
Oh,
north.
it was
It was
the Catholic Irish in the
yes, who were objecting to
Gotcha.
it.
It kind of came out of the Gaelic League.
Yeah,
yes,
and-
exactly.
Gotcha.
As a matter of fact, they
Gotcha.
My
Yeah,
understanding. and
they
I'm
tried to
sure-
raise Cayley dancing as the national dance.
That's my
So
understanding.
and Jeff, you may know this more than, I don't know, but the Dance Hall Act had a lot more to
Mm-hmm.
do with getting it out of the churches and into the halls, but was this part of that too, do you think?
I would say it would be related.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you have the
That was like
Gaelic,
35 or something.
Wasn't that so
Yeah.
they could tax it?
Taxing them, yeah, right, exactly,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
well, it kind of forced it into the bigger halls. So that the Gaelic League would have been termed essentially the nationalist movement.
right.
Yeah.
And that's when the
Trying to-
Cayleys.
Trying to elevate the Cayley, which then cast the set dances as foreign dances that they didn't want anything to do with.
Well, and the church wanted it out of the
Yeah.
churches.
The
too.
church, I understand, didn't like people touching each
Right,
other either.
right.
So that was a big
Lot of little
problem for set
features there.
dancing.
I'm seeing this fitting in, I'm seeing this fitting in with that, you
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Oh, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
Yeah. The only difference between Cayley and set dance here is these are different people doing it for different purposes and getting different enjoyment out of it. And that is a very gradual transition. There's still people that come together on the first Friday Cayleys, as Jeff knows, to do whatever they can. I guess they're mostly Marquettes during the season.
Yeah, because there's no weekly opportunity to do Cayley, so you're not going to build up a local
There's no
base
culture
like
base,
Woodford's have done.
yeah.
So, I mean, and that actually kind of leads into one of the questions. But what's your opinion and view of the current dance culture and scene with the Milwaukee area, and where do you see it eventually developing, if it will?
Well,
Boy, we're on the periphery
yeah,
now.
you have to
We're way on
remember
the
we're
periphery.
both almost 80, so
Yeah.
we haven't been
the
doing
other-
this for a real long time.
The other thing you have to remember is that we grew up without step dancing. And when we encountered step dancing at Nash's, which, the school, Cashel Denny would bring kids down to Nash's to dance on Wednesday nights because there was other dancers there. And step dancing just seemed like such a formal, structured, competitive
Well, it's
thing.
evolved. It's
And it
just
became
evolved,
more
so-
and more and more of that, that it had no appeal for us.
Yeah.
The only thing is it had the right kind of music, but usually at the wrong volume with the wrong instruments now.
So, yeah, my sense is, I mean, I stopped dancing because of my knees in 2005. And I have not really gone too much in the way of dances since, because it's no fun to go to a dance when you're not dancing. I do, but I have been at Irish Fest and a few things, and it seems to me that gradually, and we could see this even when we were still teaching, that because a lot of people who enjoy doing the dancing enjoy other types of dancing, you start getting people coming in for starts in Cayley and then it moved into sets, people doing what I would consider contra dance moves during a Cayley dance,
Mm-hmm.
or even doing them during a set dance. And so then the step dance influence, which we could see when we were at Willie Week, we could see that from year to year. More and more people showing up in hard shoes and banging the floor. And so the different dance styles are kind of mingling and influencing each other in ways that, depending on your perspective, are good or not so good, or fun or less fun. And I think that's just still continuing, and it's going to continue because there's just so much out there.
One of the things to note is that in our more recent time in Willie Week, the senior people in dancing that have been around a long time. We're trying to represent the culture, and they're trying to push it back to its cultural roots rather than having it evolve
Yeah.
into some other form altogether. And there's a conflict, and there's always going to be a conflict there. The other thing that's happened a lot that we see, I see especially because I still go now and then to dances, I see that all the sets that we used to love, that we thought were the great core essential sets, hardly ever get done. Okay?
You mean the music?
The tradition,
Sets,
no,
the actual
the
Oh, the
dance,
actual sets, okay,
dance
yes, okay.
themselves. We've mentioned the Caledonian. A lot of people don't like the Caledonian. They've got other sets they prefer to do. Well, how many sets are there? Pat's book probably had.
people keep
90.
writing them.
There were
Yeah.
90, and it's probably up to 150 now. As a matter of fact, David Delgado wrote one
Well,
in his
that was-
earliest years.
He wrote one for Woodford's.
And he forgot about it. I
anniversary of
emailed it
Woodford's
to him.
or
I said,
something.
David, you wrote this set. Anyway, but that evolution is still going on here. And it will go on. Every time an instructor comes, somebody's got a set. Once in a while, one clicks for people, and so it becomes part of Gail and Mike's repertoire, or they decide that that's a good one to teach, and it takes it a different direction. I would go back to the roots. I know those sets that I
Well-
learned, not real well anymore, and I enjoyed doing them, and they had a feeling with them. And
Yeah.
the newer sets don't
Yeah, and a
come
lot
with
of-
that baggage
a
or
lot
with
of-
that
yeah.
advantage.
The ones that we learned first, obviously, because we were in Ennis, were the Clare sets, and
Well, and
I mean, they're just there's a, what would you describe it? I mean, they all remind me of this kind, the Irish, the Celtic curly stuff. I mean, they all have that smooth interweaving in a way, and the style moves like that too, because the style basically is smooth. And those really, if I were still dancing, those are the dances I'd want to do.
So, changing track just a
Sure.
little bit, but I hear tell that you had connections to the archive when it was first being formed. Can you talk a little bit about those?
well, when I retired, I had nothing to do.
I think we were teaching dancing 4 nights a week at that point.
So I called up Ed Ward and I said, I don't have anything to do. Should I pause a second?
Yes.
Can I back up 1 second?
Yeah, of course.
When you retired, we went to Ireland for 2 months, and he helped develop the music archive at Kushnahana.
Oh, really?
Well, it's the coldest archive.
Coldest archive.
The
Yes.
Ennis chapter,
Yeah.
coldest. It's a fairly significant Clare archive at this point. Because I was only going over there and doing things and then going away, there wasn't a lot of continuity. With this archive, I started off heading down the road of trying to create a database, I guess we started with, and the objective being trying to get information about the materials that were coming into the archive, recording materials. And I built a Microsoft Access database, and I'm sure I fiddled with it $1,000, $2,000 over the years. So it was the seed from which I hope things have gone. I haven't paid much attention in more recent years, but it was the starting point for getting the archive documented. Well, I have no professional expertise. I did study history, but you don't learn how to do databases. And I studied databases, but you don't learn how to do history. So there's a lack of connection there.
Well, you did a great job, and it was very easy for our volunteers to use it. It was used not only for our database, but for database for connections for our people and everything like that. And we used it, I don't know when we changed. I mean, it was quite a few years that we were on it.
It was until 2010, and basically the data that's in our new catalog system, Past Perfect, is data from your database.
Was extracted from it?
Extracted.
Good,
So
good.
18 years,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it's pretty significant.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, well, I'm glad. I think the archive project is a great one in terms of having the resource. I was impressed when I did ABC to Win. I was impressed with the number of people that had done things to document music. I'm trying to remember the guy who did the book, the thick book. index.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Uh,
That tune index.
It's a tune index, and it says tune index in big print because I had to print the thing up on my own machine. But that kind of stuff was quite interesting. When I retired, I had a little bit of idle time at work because I was still getting paid for hanging around. So I started working on a project for trying to meet Phil Rubenzer's need to have a tool to write sheet music. And Phil's undertaking of writing sheet music meant taking a free tool that came from somebody that allowed you to enter a tune with a notation system, put in the notes of the tune, print it, but you couldn't save it. So every time Phil documented a tune and printed it, that was the end of it. And he told me about this, and I thought, that's kind of tough. And then he said, well, now I got to change this one, so it'll take me 3 days to go back and re-enter this whole tune. I thought, well, there's a better way, and I realized that Microsoft had some tools there that we could probably use, and undertook building a Microsoft database. I wrote in Visual Basic, and it was a tool that would allow you to take ABC notation, which I think Chris Walshaw and some people like that were some of the forerunners in the ABC notation system. And they documented this way of exchanging tunes via email. So you could sit down and write ABC and email to your friend, and he could play ABC. So that was the origin of that. And the notation looked like a natural because you could describe most of the characteristics of a simple traditional folk tune, Irish, Scotch, whatever. So I thought, well, I could write a program that would try to put the notes on paper and on staff and do the appropriate things. And it took me, must have been a year to write that in my spare time. And I had some wonderful helpers. Dan Beinborn was one of my helpers, did beta testing for me. There were other people that were willing to spend time with the tool. Their feedback was invaluable, and I actually had a product I could sell. And that's what I did. I sold thousands of copies of this simple program, and people were writing these ABCs all over the world. So you could get a whole collection of ABCs off of any website. Mm-hmm. And if you want somebody's britches, the tune, you probably do a search and find that tune is sing out there in ABC notation, throw it in my program in the ABCs, and organize it and format it and produce actual sheet of music with the push of a button. So that was a short-lived tool that bridged the difference between email and tunes on paper, and then what happened with things like Encore and all the other magic things that came along later. So that was an interesting exercise.
Does Phil still use that to write the book?
I don't know. Phil has gotten a little leery about publishing because of concerns there. So I don't know if he's been doing much of that lately. Last user I heard from, which is probably 4 years ago, was Felix Dolan. He loved it. So,
It also didn't you have a capacity to play the tune?
yeah, well, I didn't do that.
Oh, you didn't.
I launched a player that was written by Henrik Norbeck. Okay, and the pair still work. ABC Muse, ABCMUS. So anyway, the other thing, as long as we're talking about my retirement, I'm having fun with this. The other thing that happened, of course, is that because set dancing was starting to become popular and we were getting to know more people at set dance by doing things like going over to Ireland and meeting other people from the States that danced and so on, I thought, well, I think we should put together a website with set dancing. And thought about that. I thought, well, all these people, I could tell these people to email actually it was postal mail most of the time, I think in the beginning, mail me their dance schedules. A lot of places have with monthly dances and calendars with this stuff. Email them to me and I'll set them up on a website. So I created the North American Set Dance website. Actually, technically, I think it's called Set Dancing in North America. It's what you'd find on the archives, and that went on probably for about 5 or 6 years, I
It
think.
was that one.
Maybe not quite, but it was a lot of material, and I had folders full. I think I gave you some of that. And then
Bill Lynch.
Lynch came by, Bill Lynch,
Bill
and Bill
Lynch.
Lynch is the guy who was running a thing called London Set Dancing News or something like that. And he built more machinery than I had, and he automated more of it, and he produced a thing called Set Dancing News. And he had London, England, he had Ireland, he started doing the States, and I thought, well, let him have it. I mean, I don't have to do any work then. I got off the hook. So he evolved that, and then of course in the more recent years it's kind of faded.
I don't know if he's still doing it.
Well, it's faded. There's still chunks of stuff you can get at, yeah, but it's not quite the same magic thing it was.
Yeah, I think.
And he hasn't.
Social media maybe.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah, right. And there hasn't been a print edition
Yeah,
of that
yeah.
since I think '98 or '02 or something. So that covers my career. Want to hear about my accordion playing?
Yes.
You
What is your favorite song to play?
Polkas.
And you know why?
Polkas.
Focus, okay.
You know
Simple.
why?
Simple. They're simple.
Yeah.
Well, and I learned a lot of polkas because they were easy to learn. But the other thing is that I did attend a number of sessions. We had Nash's slow session. We had a slow session at County Clare until they shut us down. We had
some in their house.
We had sessions at our house. I participated in sessions out in Delafield at Carpenter's there and things like that, and around town here. But my playing level never reached a point where it was very great. I could play for dancing, but only if the dancers were tolerant. And I did that a lot out we did that out at O'Donoghue's. And I've gone up occasionally. I've gone up to Patty's because they still have the Thursday night session. But my skill set's deteriorating. I'm not like, who is it? Who's the resurrected accordion player back in the business after Joe? Not
Joe-
Oh,
Joe-
Joe Drake.
Joe
Jodie.
Lorraine is,
Lorraine.
well, he's passed now.
No, not whoever it was hadn't played for 40 years, and they started playing again. And he got really serious, and he came and played around. He played out, and he played publicly, and they recorded him and everything. And he said to me, I practice 2 hours a day, and I should do that. So anyway, end of story. It's been fun. You have any more questions?
Do you guys have any? No. I mean, I guess the last question I kind of like to add on is there if there was one thing that you could have done with either music or dance that you didn't get a chance to do, what would it have been?
Started earlier,
Yeah, right.
lots
Right,
earlier.
Right.
If I had discovered that when I was a kid or a 28-year-old,
Yeah.
if I had discovered the music and I realized it isn't that hard to find an instrument and play traditional Irish music, but how much had I heard? How much traditional music did we hear?
Not growing up.
Yeah.
There was,
No, it
You
wasn't
know?
there.
And once in a while you'd say, here's something on the radio, it would be a real scratchy fiddle, and you'd think, oh, and that's Irish music, and it was awful. You used to complain how bad some of the music
I
was.
absolutely hated violin music.
And would you believe it? I love that same scratchy music now because some of those
Yeah,
players are
yeah,
just
yeah.
golden.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I wish I would have been happy to have learned about it and been able to do it much
Much
sooner,
younger, yeah,
as long
yeah.
as it didn't involve step dancing.
Yeah. So that's the best
Yeah.
we can offer.
And it's good. So
Okay.
Thank you so much
Yes.
for coming
Well,
in.
I'd like to-
Thank
I'd
you for
to-
your collection to the archives. You know,